Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Elser. I'm a professor here at Arizona State University. I also have an appointment at the University of Montana, Flathead Lake Biological Station. And you may know that I'm the director of the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance, which has organized today's event. So I want to welcome you to Arizona. If this is your first visit, this is what it's like every dang day here, except in summer. You don't want to be here, actually. But in winter, this is what it's like. So I hope you're all enjoying our wonderful weather and our beautiful campus. Welcome to Arizona State University. If you are first time here, this is one of the United States' largest universities now, maybe the largest. 104,000 students are enrolled in this university. And this year, U.S. News and World Report, for the third year in a row, named ASU the country's most innovative universities. And part of that innovation is, signs of that innovation is, I think, the Phosphorus Alliance itself. This kind of organization is unusual, I think, globally or in the US, but it's not actually that unusual here on this campus. There's a lot of organizations like this here that are trying to do innovative work, cross-disciplinary, cross-sectors, partnering with industry, bringing the best science and ideas together with the most innovative entrepreneurs and forward-thinking companies that are out there to solve real problems. And so that's what we are all about in the Sustainable Phosphorus Alliance. So before I get started going on, there's a couple of things I think I need to say, one of which is this is all being recorded. So be on your best behavior. We have assigned seating, so hopefully everyone has figured out that where they're at the right table, and because there'll be some activities later on at the table level. And we're going to have lunch here, so you don't need to go anywhere. If you do leave the building, it's a little complicated to get up here, let us know. Neng Yong, the student who helped you earlier, is available to bring you up here. All right, so let's get going. First, what are we? Who is this organization, this alliance? We're sort of like the rebel force or something like that. The alliance has come together, right? So we are a members organization that exists to catalyze the implementation of innovations across all kinds of innovation to advance real phosphorus sustainability solutions in North America. Up here is a list of our current and founding members, many of which are here. The meeting, we had our board of directors meeting last night, and a really good set of conversations about what we're doing in the Alliance and what we should do during the coming year. So these are the forward-thinking folks who are really leading the charge on these issues in our system. Here are the people that are involved. You've met several of them already. Hopefully Matt has been the driving force through a lot of our activities the last year and a half or so, and a lot of the organization's work behind this event. Rebecca Munich is here. She is getting involved in some of the technical work that we're doing, and we have a brand new employee that you met on the way in, Karen Culver, who is our new marketing communications director, and so this is her first day, actually. So anyway, so she's I told her, get ready to drink from a fire hose tomorrow. And so she's going to get a lot of information about phosphorus today. And we have a wonderful board of directors, of folks who are involved in helping advance the cause, and they're over here, and many of them are here today. So thanks are due to our board of directors. Well, our mission is to be the central forum in North America and the advocate for sustainable use, recovery, and recycling of phosphorus in the food system. And we have the values of objectivity, best scientific and technical knowledge should be used in directing this kind of work. We're committed to stewardship of ecosystems and to include diverse stakeholders from across this very complicated and fascinating issue in our society. We envision at the end of this process, whenever we're successful, is that we will have a food system that manages phosphorus sustainably and produces abundant food to feed a growing population, while at the same time protecting the health of lakes, rivers, and oceans. And so we have to make those two things come together. And that's what we're trying to do. What do? We run events like this one that you're at. This is the Phosphorus Forum. We had one last year in Washington, D.C. Many of you attended that one as well. We run a technical webinar series on issues in phosphorus sustainability. Our most recent one deals with climate change impacts on phosphorus losses from agricultural production systems. We're out there on the internet. We have working groups. I'll tell you about one shortly. It deals with biosolids and manure management issues. We provide feedback as needed to organizations and processes that are in the phosphorus sector. We represent all of you internationally when we attend other events. For example, with the European Sustainable Phosphorus Platform, we'll be at this coming summer's 6th International Sustainable Phosphorus Summit in Brazil. And we'll be talking about all the things that are going on in the North American community, including in the companies and organizations that are present here today. We also help folks get out there. If you're innovating in the phosphorus sector, we want people to know about that, and we help our members be recognized for their innovation efforts. I mentioned earlier we have a task force going. Those are our main activities at the moment. We're trying to facilitate advances in this area to try to help folks get traction in being able to recover nutrients from biosolids and manure, which is a huge issue, as you all know. We have a project underway right now that's going to be a landscape analysis of state-level regulation frameworks in the United States. We're going to turn that into an ArcGIS interface to allow the community to be able to get up to speed much faster on the lay of the land literally the lay of the land in phosphorus issues related to biosolids and manure management. And so if you're curious about that, talk to me or Matt about it, and Becca, who's here as well right in front of me, who want to know more about what that task force is doing. If you want to get involved or contribute, just let us know. Okay, great. This is just a figure to depict the issue we have. Right? We need to, so these are the UN Sustainable Development Goals, right? The goal is to have zero hunger, and so we need to produce more food. We have to produce more livestock to meet the expanding markets and demand for these for food, of course. By 2050, 9-10 billion people need to be fed, and they are becoming more affluent, of course, as well, which is great. But that also means more meat production, and that puts more pressure on the phosphorus system. We have to do that at the same time that we don't forget that people need to drink water as well, and they need to have clean, healthy water for drinking. We need to have clean water for food processing. For the food industry itself, it needs access to clean water as well for food production, for food processing. And of course, recreational use of water bodies, of course, is very important. So we have to make these two things happen at the same time. So that's a challenge. So I just found this interesting article. It just came out of the Atlantic Monthly. This is sort of a Where's Waldo illustration in that article. It's kind of a fun thing. So the article is titled, Can Planet Earth Feed 10 Billion People? And humanity has 30 years to find out. And if you look at this Where's Waldo figure, it's actually, the diagram is kind of, it's a history of agriculture depicted in one place. It's kind of interesting. So here's irrigated agriculture up in this part of the diagram. Here's domestication of animals. Invention of the moldboard plow is depicted. Liebig's law shows up, so he's one of my favorite, that's one of my favorite laws. Elements come on, here's nitrogen, and Fritz and Karl, the Haber-Bosch reaction, appear, and their Nobel Prizes are right there. Here is Sir Albert Howard and the whole concept of organic agriculture. Here's a little recycling diagram right here with a poop emoji, very early innovation in communication. Up here is depicted, I'm going to touch on this in a section, is the debate between two major components in the recent domain, and that is those prophets of doom, if you will, in the form of William Vogt and limits of growth, and Norman Borlaug, and the idea of abundance and high production. And in this part of the diagram, it's where is this bus going? It's going to the leaving the 20th century, hitting 2050. With 10 billion people to feed, and the question is how do we get there without going off a cliff, right? And so this is a fascinating diagram. I looked at it, read the article, it was great, interesting article, and I was left with a question, and my question was, There's no phosphorus in this diagram. There's no phosphorus in the article. And again, yet again, phosphorus sort of falls off as a secondary, as an afterthought, even though we all know, right, that you're sitting there, you have 3 pounds of phosphorus in your body right now, approximately 2.5. It's in your bones, right? So it's completely essential for us, it's completely essential for our plants. We know that it's limiting to production, it's limiting to all of these things. We also know that it's central to regulating water quality in our surface waters. So the article has one thesis is that there's a diagram and a dialectic or a tension between folks that he refers to as wizards and prophets. And wizards are exemplified by Norman Borlaug, who was the father of the Green Revolution. And the idea is that there's a future out there of abundance and opportunity for humanity, and we get there with a series of technological advances and scientific innovation. And we just focus on production and everything, and then people will be fed. On the other hand, as exemplified by William Vogt, these people are called prophets of doom, I guess, and the emphasis here is on limits to growth. There's a carrying capacity for humanity. That carrying capacity is imposed at least partially by the environmental consequences of growth and increased production, and that humanity ought to proceed in a way that's more convenient or more conducive with harmony with natural processes in the natural environment. And so the article talks about the tension between these two schools of thought, and actually a tension between Vogt and Borlaug. Vogt came first. Apparently he didn't like Borlaug very much. Maybe some of you know more about this history than I do. Tried to suppress his funding, and they didn't get along very well apparently. But Norman Borlaug won the Nobel Prize, and Vogt didn't. There isn't even a Nobel Prize for the environment, right? There is something called the Stockholm Water Prize, though, which was invented as an environmental prize for water protection. Actually, the first one was won by David Schindler, whose scientific discovery involved phosphorus, right? He was the one who most closely identified phosphorus as the driver of eutrophication and water quality degradation. So it's an interesting tension between wizards and prophets. Maybe we'll talk about this today or we'll have a dialogue about it today. And you might ask yourself, are you a wizard or are you a prophet? And would it be a good idea to keep fighting between wizards and prophets as we try to hurdle our way toward 2050? Or maybe there's a different thing we ought to be doing. Maybe we need someone who's both blue and red at the same time. Maybe we have the beginning of a new sort of scientist or technologist or innovator now that's a combination of these things that recognizes the power of scientific innovation, but also has a systems level view of all of the things it takes for human prosperity to be manifested. So that's the sort of thing I'd like to just put in the back of your head as we go forward. Are we wizard prophets? Are we wizards? How are we going to get to 2050, and what kinds of combinations of skills and expertise and innovation do we need to achieve that? All right, so I'm just going to walk you through the agenda, and then we're going to turn it over to our morning's keynote speaker. So we have Dr. Sally Rockey coming shortly, with a talk from a group from our National Science Foundation Phosphorus Sustainability Research Coordination Network, summarizing some recent work they've finished. Luis Herrera is talking about some very interesting stuff related to phosphite fertilizer use. That's sort of a really cool thing. Here's some discussion with Kevin Dooley and Allison Thompson about market-based drivers for phosphorus sustainability innovation. A little bit of lunch, and while we're having lunch, Paul Fixon is going to entertain us with a sweeping view of plant nutrition.
Entertaining might not be right.
Okay, well, this is a room full of geeks, Paul. So this is, if you're going to be, this is your audience, I think, if you're going to make it happen. Then we're going to be talking more in the afternoon. Turn our attention to some of the recycling issues. Ned Beecher, Noel Lyons, and Amir Varashi are going to be talking about their companies and what they're doing in the sector. And then will be time for a little discussion at the end. And very important today is networking. So I encourage you all to get to know each other during the event and to wrap it up at the end with some refreshments, okay? All right, does anyone have any questions right now before I turn it over to our keynote speaker? Bruce.
Where are the restrooms?
Where are the restrooms? Good question, I don't know. Thank you for your question. It's also related to phosphorus, so that was a good question. So,
it's actually a really good question. The restrooms are down except for one, so there's a plumbing problem in the building.
this is
today.
very instructive.
So there's one restroom open on each floor currently. So it's there's nothing we can do.
Across the elevators, the hall, and the women's restroom is on the right. The men's restroom on the left is closed, but there's a family restroom on the right.
Okay, wow. I had no idea that question would be so complicated. Other questions? Anything else? Okay, so it's my pleasure now to bring up our keynote speaker, Dr. Sally Rockey. It's sort of intimidating, actually, because she is such an accomplished person in the science world for her career with the USDA, but also with NIH. And she's been instrumental in implementing a lot of important programs over the years. And so we're very lucky to have her here today. And so I'm going to turn it over to you.
Jim. Well, actually, I should tell you just a little bit more about myself. I'm an entomologist from The Ohio State University. TOSU, as our new acronym is, and The Ohio State University. That should be a capital T, by the way. One might ask how a person who is an entomologist becomes the deputy at the NIH for extramural research, and it's because I know how to bug people. Well, come on, laugh. That's about all I got. That's really. So thanks so much for having me. This is wonderful. The weather was beautiful. I had a wonderful walk over here this morning. And this is an important area. I wanted to tell you a little bit about our foundation and how we might work together on some of the issues that are important to you as well as to agriculture. I also want to talk to you a little bit just about agriculture research and the situation we're facing in trying to fund agriculture research in this country. So humans' closest relationship with Earth is through agriculture, so we always have to think about agriculture as a way that not only do we have our bounty from the Earth, but we have to give back. And much of what Jim had talked about just a moment ago in the world of phosphorus is all about the recycling, reuse. And so we have to protect our Earth so that it will continue to provide for that bounty. So you mentioned a couple of these things, but if you look at the innovations that have done the most to shape the nature of modern life, here's the top 10 there, but as you see going on with Fritz there in 1918, it's surprising that Norman Borlaug comes out at 22, but he does. We have the mold board, cotton gin, pasteurization, plant breeding with Mendel, the monk who did the pea experiments to understand plant breeding back in 1866, and the combine harvester. These are, of course, agriculture plays a huge role in our everyday lives, not only for feeding us, but also because of all the technologies that have gone behind. It is very interesting, the idea about which side are you on if you are going to use technology, or in the case that Jim just mentioned. But all of these technological advances have really led to the world that we live in today. And I like to think our foundation is working in that space as well, to think about how technology can solve these problems, but also just to think about agriculture in general and how we are going to promote an agriculture to feed 10 billion people by 2050. So I will tell you, I was the head of the research, the competitive research program at the USDA for 19 years, left there and went to NIH. And I was at NIH for 11 years. And when I retired from the government and came to start the foundation that I'm at now, the change in agriculture and agricultural sciences was extraordinary in those 11 years. Agriculture is one of the most exciting places to be. As you know, any of you are venture capitalists in this room. 10 years ago, there were about 5 venture capitalists working in agriculture technology. Now there's around 1,200 work in this area. It's just incredible. It's an area where everyone is interested in. It's an easy area to take fundamental science and apply it directly to real world problems. Sometimes new technologies that are evolving apply to our sector more quickly than any other. For example, I'll give you the example of gene editing, which I think it was discovered, when CRISPR-Cas was discovered, it was in place in agriculture and being used almost immediately in plants and animals. And so we adopt new technologies quickly. And of course, consumers, everyone is interested about the food they eat. Most consumers are interested in the food they eat, but very few consumers understand how the food is produced. So this is a real circular logic in many ways, that we want certain things as consumers, but yet we don't really realize what we're eating or how that food's produced. So the other thing about agricultural research is, in general, when you think about research, its applicability is usually 15 to 20 years, 30 years down the line. But what we see in agriculture is oftentimes it's as little in 2 years, because one of the things that we're doing in agriculture is not always producing a product, right? We're trying to change production practices. Oftentimes, as soon as the data comes out from results of scientific research, those data are put into practice, and so we can have an impact on how agriculture is conducted almost immediately, seen almost immediately. The other thing that's happening right now, which is breathtaking, is things are happening so fast in science, and the acceleration is so fast in science, that new technologies are almost out of fashion within a year, and something new is going to come ahead. The other place that we're really accelerating is, of course, in the pace of data. We have to take advantage of this. There's been more data generated in the last 2 years than in our entire existence on this planet, and that just continues to accelerate. So we have to take, as agricultural scientists and working in agricultural research, we have to take advantage of this credible time in our history. And just to give you an example of how fast things are going, Ed Buckler, by the way, we established with the Gates Foundation what we like to think of the Nobel Prize in Agriculture at the National Academy of Sciences for a mid-career scientist to win a prize, a personal prize of $100,000. It's not big like the Nobel Prize, but it was the first time the National Academy of Sciences had a prize in agriculture, and it's for mid-career scientists. And this is an example that Ed Buckler used, who won the prize. He's an ARS scientist at Cornell who works on improving nutritional traits in plants, including vitamin A in plants. But he gave the example of how fast we are now sequencing DNA. So I was very involved in the plant genome program back in the 80s, at the same time the human genome program was coming about. And sequencing DNA has become 1 billion times faster and cheaper than it was in 25 years. So what does 1 billion times really look like? So if you think about computers, you think how much faster computers are. That's only 125,000 times faster. Now, Ed would use the example of what does 1 billion times look like? He had about a 3.7 mile walk to work every day, and he walked it every day. It took about an hour to walk to work. If that was 1 billion times faster, he could walk in an hour to Pluto. So that tells you how fast that really is. We need to take advantage of this. One thing in agriculture, we had a big data program at NIH, and I said, when I came back to agriculture, you do not have big data in biomedicine. You're concerned with one animal, right? The human. In agriculture, we're interested in data: sky, earth, air, animals, plants, soil, people, behavior. Everything is part of agriculture. So our data is really big. We have to take advantage of that and be able to use those data and analyze those data and do the analytics. Really going to help our producers and help our scientists make more advances. So some of the burgeoning fields in ag research, of course, phenomics and genomics. We really need to understand the traits that are important in plants and animals and enhance those traits in order to be able to have either higher yield, more nutritional quality, more resilience to environmental change, less impact on the environment. Of course, I just mentioned big data. All of the things we do in imaging and drones. We're reducing environmental impacts much on some of the technologies, including the technologies that you are working in the phosphorus world, and also soil health to human health. There's a lot we can understand about our relationship between agriculture and our systems with human health. So let's talk a minute about R&D. So we have been the leaders in research funding in all sectors for most of our lifetime as a country. And we're seeing, particularly in funding for agriculture R&D, that the USDA, at least public funding for agriculture R&D, is diminishing in constant dollars. So this is a graph. I don't know if this is working. Where is it? Oh, there it is. So here's the United States in constant dollars. Here is China. So China is just, I've been over there. They have a sequencing farm that's in this warehouse that now does genome sequencing and has the capacity in this one gigantic warehouse of the rest of the world's sequencing power in one place. They have more in that one place than the rest of the world combined. So it's just incredible, and they're devoting so much money to research. Now, in my opinion, research done anywhere is good for research everywhere, right? Particularly in agriculture, where we're a global system. However, for the United States that has had leadership in this area, and that people flock to the United States not only for scientific training but also for understanding our very efficient agricultural systems, we want to continue to be leaders. And part of that is our investment and the decisions we make as taxpayers of where we want to put our investment. And I would contend that investment in agriculture is a great deal for the American taxpayer. But let's look at what we actually fund. So these are all of the public funding in agriculture. This is Department of Defense. This is where I was at, NIH, and I will tell you, having been on NIH and being in charge of $28 billion a year for scientific research, you understand what the power of money brings you. It allows you to take risks. It allows you to be quick and move into new scientific directions easily, and it allows you to build up that scientific knowledge base that's needed for where we're going to see our discoveries come from. And here is NSF, but here is USDA. So of all the funding for research, public funding for agriculture research is about 2% of the federal pie. If you take out DOD from the equation, DOD is an interesting agency because they are not only the funders of research, but the buyers of that research. So they really do buy back the technologies that they pay for fund. So it's a circle here. If you take out DOD, USDA is about 4% of the public investment and funding. So my question is, why isn't agriculture research funded commensurate with its value? It's really incredible. And Kurt Vonnegut told the whole story. When it comes right down to it, it's practically the whole story every time. It's about food, right? Food is everything. So I have been in agriculture for 30 some years, and this was the same question we had when I joined the USDA in 1986. Same question we had: how do we get more funding into agriculture research? So when I was at NIH, I used this chart to show the value of biomedical research. This is life expectancy in the US. And if you can see, now women live to be over 80 and men almost 80. In 1990, a person born in 1900, life expectancy was 46. That little drop there was a 1917-18 flu that killed millions of people in this country. We're seeing this go up. So I gave a lot of props to biomedical research, but I also gave props to what? Agricultural research, right? Because we feed people with more nutritious food. We help women who are pregnant have nutrition that is going to reduce infant mortality. Our food is much more safe. Foodborne illness killed a lot of people back in the days before we really knew how to control it. And just the whole system of agriculture has changed the quality of the food that we eat. However, if this chart went further, for the last 2 years, our life expectancy actually has gone down. And it's due to two things. One is food related. And you all know what that is, which is obesity, right? The incidence of heart disease has gone up in the last couple years because of obesity-related chronic illness. It's a really weird quagmire we have in this world because we have 700 million people who are going to go to bed each night malnourished across the world, but we have 1.5 billion people who suffer some sort of disease or condition due to obesity. 1.5 billion people across the world. So for agriculture, we have to feed the world, but we also, both obesity and malnutrition have the same problem. It's a problem of nutrition and calories and what we have. So we have to figure that out. The other thing that we're losing to now in the last couple years is the opium epidemic and drugs. We have seen 38,000 people last year died of opium overdoses. So that is that's actually impacting our planet. So obesity is another issue for we in the agriculture community to really think about how we're going to tackle this and how the food that we eat contributes to this. So more food will be eaten in the next 50 years than the past 7,000 years, and how are we going to feed this in when there's public decline in R&D funding? Well, I'm still very hopeful. But part of this is the reason that our foundation came about. This is our vision. I think it's similar to your vision. We envision a world in which ever innovating and collaborative science provides every person access to affordable, nutritious food grown on thriving farms. That's our vision for our Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research. So we build unique partnerships. So we're all about public-private partnerships addressing today's food and agricultural challenges. We not only aspire to have public-private partnerships, but we're required to have it. So we were established in 2014 as a way to fill that gap, to try to put more money into agriculture. We create novel pathways to do this by these public-private partnerships. We were given a great gift of $200 million from the American taxpayers, the Sardar Foundation, and our closest partner is the USDA. There's about 14 federal agencies that have an associated 501c3 nonprofit. We are the USDA's new nonprofit, so we can serve as a fundraising arm for them, but we also are an independent organization because we have our own funds as well. And we leverage those dollars. So with that $200 million, we have to have non-federal funding match in order to spend it. So we can't spend a penny unless we have some non-federal match with it. And this is what we fund. We fund research gaps and white spaces, right? So we are small compared to the USDA. You saw that USDA has about $3 billion a year in funding. And although they don't have a lot in competitive funding, they have about $350 million in competitive funding. So we work with them to try to say, what is it that we could work with the private sector on in spaces that's really going to accelerate science and fill those gaps. So that's really where our area is concentrated on. So here is why we have this opportunity. If you look at who are the major funders of this looks a lot like that past chart with China, but this is comparing who funds agricultural research. And you see that the total food ag R&D is really growing. Many of you represent some of that. And so that's where this opportunity is to set up public-private partnerships where we can leverage public funds with private funds. One of the great things about leveraging our funds, which are public funds, with the private funds is that because it's publicly funded, we then make agreements with the organizations with whom we work to make those data available to the public. So there has to be some sort of public a publication of those data or results in order for us to enter into agreements. And this is sometimes unusual with the private sector to have that, but it's a great opportunity for us. So it means we have to move together. And what does it mean to work? We think about working in what we call the pre-competitive space. And that's where we pool our resources for public benefit. We believe that we can accomplish more together than we can individually. So I tried to figure out what is a definition of pre-competitive space, because people ask me it all the time. What does that mean? And I, for the life of me, with all of Google at hand, could not find a definition for pre-competitive space. So I found a definition for the competitive space, and that's areas of business in which a firm feels comfortable against competitive pressure on the basis of its cost advantage and or technological leadership. So that's the competitive space. So I thought, well, what if I take those blue words and just put in an opposite word? It doesn't work at all. Areas of business in which a firm feels uncomfortable against unambitious relaxation on the basis of its cost disadvantage and or technological inferiority. So that definitely is not the pre-competitive space, right? So I came up with it, areas of research where the outcomes offer no particular advantage relative to peers and where there's potential to positively impact all parties. So if you have a number of companies coming together, they've got to be willing to say, hey, this is going to benefit us all. It's usually in a more fundamental area of science where there's some obstacle to advancement. They're going to be willing to work together, and it's going to be cost effective. It allows resources and data to be shared. So their incentives are, a lot of companies have corporate social responsibility. They can overcome these obstacles to advancement. There's cost savings. So in all of our programs, because we put in money and the private sector puts in money, they're doing a project that they probably could not afford to do alone. They get access to all the expertise in academia. And they also get to cultivate future employees. Companies like yours, many of you in this room, are very interested in the next generation. And when you're funding universities together through public-private partnerships, you're getting first access to those students and trainees that are there working on these problems. For the public sector, you get to address real-world problems. You get to transfer that research into the economy almost immediately. You also get access to resource and data because the companies will come and offer something at the table. And then, of course, you get access to the expertise at the companies. So there's a lot of things that have to work in order to get these to work. And we are not great. I'm not going to say that we're all hands at this. So we have started now 3 public-private partnerships. All of our grants also have private sector funding. But we have 3 consortia that we have started where the private sector brings in money, joins with membership, much like you, a membership organization. You have to have shared goals and honesty. If you don't have these kind of things, these public-private partnerships just blow up. You have to have responsibility on rules of engagement. This is really important, a lesson we learned right away. If you don't have everything laid out on the table, and you're, let's say with a big company, we do work with Bayer and other companies, if you don't have this laid on the table that's clear, you're going to have lawyers from these big companies taking years to try to address your agreements. So you want to make them quite simple. In the case of us, we try to say we're IP free, although we have more simple ways to address IP if it happens, including what IP comes into a consortium. But we try to make it as simple as possible. We want transparent value proposition for each partner. So what is the partner getting out of joining the consortium? They have to be able to see that. There's got to be some sort of synergy that's going to evolve when you're working together. And then you have to have skin in the game. Everybody's got to contribute to these partnerships in order for it to work. And then you celebrate your success and you also share responsibilities for your failures. So we'll see. We have a couple of these. These are the kind of groups that are funding us now across the gamut. And so we are working in these grand challenge areas. Of course, many of these, sustainable livestock production, right up your alley, environmental stewardship, plant efficiency. So we're facing many of these grand challenges ourselves for our organization. So here is how we have contextualized our challenges, and we have 7 challenge areas, many of which you can see. Our sustainable animal production falls in protein challenge, but we have food waste and loss, healthy soils, thriving farms, which I'll talk about in a minute. Making my plate your plate is about food access. Urban food systems, our principal focus there, a consortium that we're building is on controlled environments, and then dealing with water scarcity. Now, we have purposely not gone into the area of water quality because we're small. So although water quality could be impacted, of course, in many of these areas and could be a component of research that we funded. But we're dealing more with water scarcity. I'll try to look where the white spaces and gaps. So many groups are in water quality that we chose not to have that as a challenge area. So, so let me just talk about a couple things. Franklin Roosevelt said, "A nation that destroys its soil destroys itself." Very true. We started with soil health as one of our major focuses in our foundation. These are some of the areas. I wanted to mention the 4R nutrient research project that we funded through our seeding solutions. Let me tell you that once a year, all of our challenge areas are open for our open call. We'll fund usually only one project per challenge area. That will open in March, on March 1st. That is $1 million from FAR. We ask up to $1 million from FAR, and we ask that the applicants bring in the match. Remember, the match can come anywhere that's not federal. So it can come from a state and local government, commodity group, a industry, from its own university, as long as it's not its federal funds that it's using, et cetera. So we had a grant that rose to the top for our nutrient research through our soil health program. We funded with the Nobel Research Foundation a very large $6 million project on cover crops. This is to look at germplasm in cover crops and also understand the cover crops that we need in which environments for which cropping systems it's going to work for both phosphorus, nitrogen, and soil erosion and other nutrient management in crops. And then finally, we just announced in December our $20 million soil health initiative that was with the Soil Health Institute, the Soil Health Partnership, and the Nature Conservancy. It was also funded by General Mills, the Walton Family Foundation, the Walmart Foundation, a number of other groups as well. This is the largest soil health initiative there's been so far, funded for research purposes. And it's designed to do three things. One is to bring the metrics and measurements for soil health over the finish line. If you know, we've been working on soil health measurements for many years. Bring that over the finish line. The Soil Health Partnership is doing on-farm research in soil health, looking at different cropping systems. And the Nature Conservancy is looking at non-operator landowners and how we can incentivize them to care about soil health in the land that they own. Improving plant efficiency, we're looking, we funded with the Gates Foundation a very large project on photosynthesis to increase yield. We're also looking at environmental resilience and desired nutritional traits through our Crops of the Future. And we're taking advantage of all the latest technologies in plant efficiency. So this is our Crops of the Future collaborative. You can see the companies and organizations that have joined down at the bottom. We have 2 more companies joining in the next, actually one is joined, I don't think it's on here. Benson Hill has joined, and we have about 13 other companies that will probably join by the year. Looking at we're starting with corn, wheat, and leafy greens to look at the traits that are desirable traits. So water use efficiency, we have quite a bit in there going on. We're making a collaborative on irrigation technology innovations with the private sector, reuse and recycling of water, and also plant water use efficiency is important in this area as well. And then sustainable livestock production, where much of your interest might lie. To be frank, we are not have not had a program in sustainable livestock production yet, but it is on the horizon, so we'd love to talk with you about where we might go in this area. We have a collaborative starting on antimicrobial stewardship, a collaborative starting there. We had a convening event on sustainable animal production at the National Academy of Sciences last December. But yet we're still not ready to have a program yet in sustainable animal production, which would include manure management, of course, greenhouse gas reduction, et cetera. So I'd love to talk to all of you about that area and see where we can grow in that area. Probably by the time we get something organized, it would be in early 2019, where we'd be putting together either collaborative or calling for proposals. But let's work together on this piece of it. I'd really like to hear your input on that. And then we also working on environmental stewardship in many of our areas. That's at the heart of what we do in plant resiliency. We did do the World Wildlife Fund did a food waste project on farm reduction, actually food loss production. and with the Walmart Foundation. And we have also about to fund a project looking at grazing management techniques that we're doing with a university that shall go nameless, but I think we're standing on its campus. And with McDonald's on looking at different grazing techniques. I can't announce it officially because it's going to be announced in a couple weeks. So we are working in that area somewhat to look at that. So we really think about this way, and this is what I'm here today to meet many of you and to think about how we can work together, how we can pool resources and then pool our knowledge and share our risks together and fund some really, really innovative science that's going to take us to the next level. That's going to not only change agriculture, but be a benefit to humanity. And so here's how you connect to us. You can connect to our newsletter. We'd love to have you. I do tweet, so if you want to, I'll tweet today a little bit about the meeting. If you want to join me on my tweet, it's Rock Talking. And we also have a really great website if you want to see what we're doing. We will always accept a great idea. We have a concept portal. If you have something that you'd like to propose to us, you can come through our concept portal. And also, call any of us. We are a lean, mean fighting machine, as I call us. We're 15 people strong, and that's about as big as we're going to get. But you get a lot of personal attention from us, and we're always looking for that innovation space. So that's really what we'd like to fund. So that's it. So thanks. And I'll answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for that. We have time for questions, but let's make sure we use the microphone because we're recording. So who has a question? Over here. Matt?
I'd be interested, thanks, nice talk, and I'd be interested in understanding if you have ideas on how smaller organizations, for instance, our nonprofit or other smaller companies can get engaged. It seems like you're working with fairly large organizations and putting together partnerships on broad, big scale.
Yeah, actually we have funded, we take any size. Actually, a couple of the companies that are joining our consortium are very small. We have actually funded a couple very small companies. We funded a company to work on chick vaccines. That was really innovative to apply chick vaccines directly to the nasal mucosa, which now they spray it in the face and it doesn't get anywhere. We've funded, so a company can apply to us, first of all. If you want to be part of consortia, what we do is we try to work on, based on the size of the company, to see what they could do to be part of a consortia, because we recognize that we have usually a sliding scale of how a company can join. The smaller companies have a very tiny membership just to get them at the table. We also, companies can apply to any of our grant programs. That's really important. I spend a lot of time at all the showcases to see where the new innovation space with companies is. My board, I think, is sort of split on the idea of whether or not we fund startups. I'm all gung-ho on startups because I think that's where the innovation space is, but for us as a new organization, and we're looking to be refunded in the next Farm Bill. So right now is really important. The board views it a little bit of a risk because we want to get refunded, but in my mind, the small companies have some of the greatest innovation. So you're welcome to apply to any open call we have for our organization, or call us with an idea. We'd be happy to talk with you about it. We're not a venture capital company, though. We can partner with venture capital groups and have done it to fund projects, but we have different outcomes in mind, where they have a return on the investment for their investors. We have the advancing of science for our outcome. You also have to be willing to publish, which is one thing with the small companies. We have to sort of work that deal of what we can get out in the public with a small company, because your very livelihood is dependent on being able to hold on to your IP. So we have to figure out what you can publish. It might be metadata, it might be something other than all the actual data, but we will work something in there. And also, we can take a return. When we fund with a company, we usually work out some IP so that if there's a windfall or something, we can work some return to our organization for future research use.
Thank you for your presentation. That was very informative. You sort of took the side of the innovator in your presentation. Do you have any comments on kind of the other side, saying let's slow down on genetics?
Yeah, I think we try to, one of the good things about our organization is we try to be a neutral party. So what we really are about is the science advancing, and it's not also always in the technology area. We believe both sides. We don't we want things to be evidence-based. That's really what we're about. So we're about funding research that's going to lead to hopefully evidence-based policy decisions. But it doesn't have to be all technological. And so we look for, when the innovation space is not necessarily a technology, it can be a lot of different things. We also fund social sciences. So there's a lot of issues in social science. For example, I'll give you a very strange, not strange, but strange thing happened to us. We funded this very small project on cage-free hens. And because the industry is moving towards cage-free and for purposes of animal welfare, and the problem is that cage-free environments cause huge animal welfare problems because birds are very vicious, they fight with each other. They do this strange behavior called piling, where one bird piles on top of another bird. Then you might have 150 birds. And up to 80% of chickens and hens in cage-free environments can have broken keels, breastbones. So we were funding a project to look at how we improve bone health, either by minimizing housing or changing housing, by improving feed so the chickens would have stronger bones, or through breeding so they'd have stronger bones, or to breed out that this behavior. At the same time, then we funded a project on consumer acceptance of cage-free hens, which was really after the fact. Really, we should have, before the industry decides to change. There's always trade-offs when you change production practices, right? So we could have done that. So we're looking at consumer attitudes towards cage-free hens, cage-free eggs, which we should have done at the onset. But this thing got so it was everywhere. It was in the New York Times, it was in the Washington Post, I was interviewed on every TV station for this little project, but it was because of that human component. You know, what are we doing? We drove, consumer preference has driven the change in practice, but we didn't really have the science behind it. So we said we'll swoop in there and try to do some of the science, both on the consumer side and on the animal side. So that's sort of how the attitude that we go. So I'm on both camps. In Jim's example, I'm on, or the Atlantic example, I'm on both sides. I'm in both, and I would hope our organization is viewed as being on both. Now, I will say I'm a geeky person. I really love technology, so all that whiz-bang stuff, I love that kind of stuff, but in agriculture, it's the whole gamut.
Time for another one.
Hi, very nice talk. Do you have any international programs or international entities can participate in your consortium?
Yes, we can work internationally. Ironically, with our Crops of the Future consortium, all of the companies are international. So we can fund across the planet, so we can fund internationally as well as our companies can be international. But we also work in some international space. So for example, CIMMYT, it's in Mexico, they work wheat. We are forming a consortium on food waste with the Rockefeller Foundation that's going to take place in Honduras and Africa, so we can actually fund areas. The big problem now with fall armyworm, that it's making its way across Africa. In 2016, they found it in one country in Africa, and now it's in 3/4 of all African countries. We are working with USAID to fund. We have a program called Rapid Outcomes from Ag Research, which is about emerging pests and pathogens. We're funding, we'll be funding in Africa for that. So we can do it across the world. But the problem for us is that our Congress, while they've certainly appreciated and has actually allowed us to fund through our authorization internationally, we want to see some sort of U.S. ties. So if it can relate back to U.S. agriculture, better position solely in. But yes, we fund with a lot of organizations and issues that are around the world. Now, one of the things that's happened to us is that I have $200 million over 5 years, hopefully to have another $200 million. It leverages to $400 million. Actually, we're about at a 1 to 1.4 leverage, so it's more than $200 million. But I need a zero behind my $200 million because if you see, I mean, $200 million is a drop in the bucket. I mean, I was just with my friends from NIH on Thursday, and I said, I just need your round off figures. You know, if you have accounting errors, just send them my way. It would really be helpful because the innovation that's come across our transect is incredible, and we have to be, especially at the beginning when we're trying to get things out and establish ourselves as an organization, we just don't have the funding to fund everything that's come across our transect. And I'd love to see more public-private partnership. If you look at the USDA's goals for the next Farm Bill in research, it's all about public-private partnerships. So I think the expectation is even the USDA agencies will engage more with the private sector. Sonny Perdue has put that forth. I think that bodes well for we as an organization because that's what we're about. But it really is the nature of the way that research is going to happen in the future in agriculture.
Okay, we have time for one more.
Your project on doubling photosynthesis sounds to me like very basic level research. You try to maintain a balance of basic and applied.
Yeah, well, in agriculture, there's really a gray area. I mean, in my mind, there's not a distinct distinct basic and distinct applied. And I'll give you, that's an example, a great example of the photosynthesis project. It's called RIPE, which is research on increasing photosynthetic efficiency. And in that project, it's funded by the Gates Foundation, ourselves, and a European organization, and it's a huge project. It's $45 million. We put in $15 million. And it's been teasing out every single pathway and every single process known to man about photosynthesis, and so far there's been over 200. And those are targets to manipulate through breeding or through other means in order to improve photosynthetic efficiency. But it has had incredible direct outcome because we've been able to improve most of the plants that we're looking at by yield by 25 to 40% by manipulating photosynthesis. We work on cassava, cowpea, and when we came in, we started working on soybean. We wanted to bring the US crops in. It's just incredible what the outcome has been from this very fundamental process. Most of our work has been very production oriented, though, I will say. But again, because we're doing PreCompetitive Space, it seems it's very applied, but it's more on the, if you had to take a side, it'd probably be more a little bit on the basic side because that's what the companies need. I mean, there's been a great outcry for the USDA to fund more fundamental science, and I lose sleep about that because this knowledge base is rate limiting, right? Our advances are really going to require we have a strong knowledge base. And the bigger agencies always devote a lot of funding to basic science. That's not really our role, though, for agriculture. For our foundation. We really look at the outcomes. So funding the photosynthesis project was really for those applied outcomes of increasing yield.
Okay, that's great, Sal. I appreciate it. I was just reflecting on your comment about funding. I work a lot in China, and I work on some issues in high elevation ecosystems. And I was meeting with a colleague who's the director of the Institute for Tibetan Plateau Research, and he told me that I heard indirectly that his 3-year budget for his institute was $1 billion.
It's just incredible.
That is just one Chinese Academy of Sciences research institute.
Yeah, China the government of China is devoting something like almost $7 billion a year in ag research. So it's really incredible. Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate it.